I think what I've gained from my journey and following the things that I love and appreciate is becoming sort of the captain of your own destiny and discovering so many more ways of working. A big part of it was giving myself permission to fail, to really reach for things that were totally beyond my abilities. From that, you develop a greater sense of confidence and you roll with the punches. You learn to incorporate the happy accidents. My artistic journey began when I was like 5 years old. I was in the Texas Children's Hospital going through the second of two open heart surgeries, and the Batman TV show was on. And my family saw how totally captivated I was by that television show. They started bringing me comic books, and that was all she wrote. I was totally hooked on comics forever, and wanted to be a comic artist and pursued that doggedly, even though in my family we had books on Rembrandt and Pissarro and all that. It wasn't until I got into art school that my path widened considerably, and I wanted to become a painter, printmaker. I basically wanted to do it all. I did work in the sequential art field, but apprenticed early on when I was a freshman in art school and found out that I didn't want to do comics for a living. I wanted to do them because I wanted to do them. So I pursued gallery work and everything, writing, filmmaking, the whole bit. And so I'm a total art nerd. I love everything about it, and I have made it sort of my journey to explore sort of non-traditional avenues of media, and I'm hoping to bring you guys along for a ride on that same sort of journey. So many artists that inspired me, and it's really difficult to nail any one down. I was a Rembrandt freak. I was a Norman Rockwell fan, Goya, the American Impressionists, Whistler, Sargent, Homer, Remington, and then there were the whole slew of illustrators, Howard Pyle and the people he taught, which are N.C. Wyeth, Harvey Dunn, and then they went on to teach a whole other group of people. But one artist in particular that I did really a couple that I found myself incredibly fortunate to have have them take me under their wing was Baron Story and Jeffrey Jones. And those artists, they're sort of at opposite ends stylistically. Like Baron is really, a master draftsman, but he gets down on it, where Jeff was more about the emotional content and the organic quality and sort of art for art's sake sort of thing, which Baron was too, but just different avenues of detail in their work and stuff, and different sort of aesthetics. But I was very fortunate to have both of those artists as sort of what I set my compass to. One of the events that sort of bumped me off the straight and narrow towards sequential art was the publication of the studio book, which included four of my favorite sequential artists: Jeffrey Jones, Bernie Wrightson, Michael William Kaluta, and Barry Windsor Smith, who were all sequential artists, but they also did illustrated books. They did prints and portfolios, and they had gallery shows. And specifically Jeff Jones' work, because he was painting, doing oils, was just like, it sort of shook me. And it made me feel really good about sequential art, because these were guys, all four of them, that had approached it as a true art form, but they diverged, and they had bigger sights than just that, and that was like an eye opener and an exciting new path to sort of explore. And that book changed my generation of artists tremendously. We all that becomes a touchstone for a lot of people, so. I think what I've gained from my journey and following the things that I love and appreciate is, well, one, becoming sort of the captain of your own destiny, and discovering so many more ways of working, and sort of get, a big part of it was giving myself permission to fail, to really reach for things that were totally beyond my abilities, and to go out knocking on doors. I mean, I was calling all of my heroes, and they almost without question took me in and explained to me why they were doing what they were doing and how much, and I could see the passion from all these people, and they took the time to help a newbie like me, and like give me that confidence to keep trying and keep going, and to see how successful they were in sort of the same pursuits. That was huge. Where before I was very much like a lot of people. I mean, it's how we learn. I was an art clone. I was like a lot. I wore my, and still do, my influences on my sleeve, and but through that process and then that sort of overreaching, slowly, found my own voice. And even though, you always carry those other voices with you and they show up in mysterious and strange ways, but I began to do, I read widely, and that opened all kinds of doors. And so, I was finding my own way and my own interests and my own passions. And that's what, has been really gratifying. But I don't think I could have gotten there, possibly, but I don't think I could have gotten there without the help of all these other people and their work. Just being, under the spell of their work took me places I probably wouldn't have gone had I not seen that work. Man, do I have anxieties about art or following art all the time. I don't know how you can do any of this stuff without having anxiety. Over the years, I'm better equipped now and more understanding of my cycles. Earlier on, it would be like I would have these, it was feast or famine, and I would have these fallow periods where I just didn't feel like drawing, or it felt like like it wasn't happening. And that was scary because it was like, oh my God, is it gone? Am I going to get it back? Am I going to be able to do this? And it always came back around. And so I realized I have these cycles, and where I have like explosive creativity, and then I draw in, and it becomes playing guitar, reading, writing, all kinds of other. They're still creative pursuits, but they're not my art. So, but that literally feeds the other. And so I think that's part of, it's like, it's like having to feed it so that I have something to actually spit back out, to actually process and work with. I don't know how anyone can have this job, be in this, and it is a job, like any other job. I mean, you wait, but you can't turn it off. That's what sucks. It's every day, it's all the time. You can't turn it off. You don't turn it on. It's always on. But how anyone can do that and not have anxiety about, just, am I going to make enough money at it? Are these pieces going to sell? Like, I'm like the biggest collector of my own stuff. It's like stacks and stacks. And it's like, on the flip side of that, it's never been about the money. I want the money, obviously, because if I have money, I can continue to do what I do. And it's, you have to have it. It's one of the cruel necessities of the world that you have to have it. But, and the money opens doors. It allows me to buy my supplies, it keep food on the table, all those things that every person has to deal with. But it's never been about, the creativity and the drawing and the painting has never been about the money. The money is like this great thing that I can get if I sell them, but I didn't do them because I was going to sell them. I mean, I hoped I would sell them, but it's like, I'm not drawing for a particular audience. I'm drawing for me, which is always where I get the best work. But yeah. I mean, I love being creative too, but geez, I mean, I think it's the most difficult job on the planet. I mean, I know it's not, but one, it's amazing to me that you can put food on the table and have a career with a stick with hair on the end of it, right? Pretty crazy, and when it's going great, it's the best job on the planet. It's like, man, things are things are singing, man, it's great. But when things aren't going great, I just, if you don't love it, I can't imagine being in a worse spot, And I would assume that that's with any pursuit, You have to love what you're doing, or what's the point. And when it's great, but when it ain't, it's the worst. And if you didn't love it, the money would never be worth it. It would never be enough money to do it. So I was proactive with my education. I was incredibly fortunate with my education because I had a family that was incredibly supportive, and my dad and my mom paid for my education. But when I got to art school, I was in heaven. I mean, it was everything I wanted it to be, and a lot that I didn't want it to be. Like, there were aspects that I'm still angry about, but I tell my students all the time, it's like, look, it doesn't matter where you go or where you study. A huge chunk of your knowledge and your education has to come from you. You've got to make that happen. You need to go out and, shake the bushes, rattle the cages, and because you know what you're missing. I tell students, I'm like, hey, as teachers, we're flying blind a lot of times. I'm telling you the things that I think you need to know, the things that I wasn't told, and a lot of things I was told, but here's a one size fits all. Here's this stuff that I think is important to know. But if you talk to me and you explain what it is you want to do with this and where you want to go with your life and all this stuff, it's like, oh man, okay, now I can tailor information to that. You know what I mean? But until then, if you're like one of the silent people in the back that's just sort of the sponge and just doing your thing, it's not that you're not going to get a good education, but you're not going to get the ultimate complete education if you're not asking questions and if you're not like hounding people for the things that you absolutely need. So I was really lucky, and again, I say luck. It's like I was lucky in the sense that when I hounded them and tracked them down and knocked on their doors, they were cool about it and took me in and like gave me what I needed for free, because they just love what they're doing and they love the idea that anyone else wants to do it. And whenever I said, hey, I can't pay you back, I don't know, and they're like, pay it forward. So I had amazing teachers. Some were actual teachers, when I went to art school, and then some weren't. They didn't want to be teachers, but they were like these incredible fountains of information. Like Jeff Jones, if you asked him outright things, he sort of would kind of clam up. But if you were like, yeah, I'm having trouble with whatever, all this information would come out, and you were like, oh man, oh my God, A lot of unsuspected teachers, but they all were there for the right reasons. They wanted to share their knowledge. They loved sharing their knowledge. And those are teachers. There are teachers out there that are like, the question they ask themselves is, why would I want to train people to take my place? Well, that's not a teacher. Sorry. The people that are real teachers are like, here's how you do it. Here it is. Now I don't have any secrets, because, this stuff, look, like techniques. Ooh, it's like, I didn't come up with this technique. I may have stumbled on something, but a lot of it was handed to me by other people who knew that technique. You got it from, and it's like, you don't own this stuff. It's the knowledge, and you give it freely, or you shouldn't be in the business of pretending to teach. That's what teachers are about. And I had a lot of great teachers. I had a lot of bad teachers too, but I had mostly great teachers. So you have to get in there. I've said it in the course here, several times. You got to get in there and wallow around in it. You have to get really dirty with it. And most students, when I'm teaching oils, they come in with that attitude. I hate oils. And it's like, well, it's going to suck to be you, because we're doing oils in this class for a whole semester. So get ready. And they halfway through, they're like, oh my God, man, I'm loving this. And it's like, right. So you never know. It's like, try everything more than once, more than twice, try it 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 100 times. And then you're going to really know, and you're going to find your way, But but you got to be reasonable with teachers. One, if you're quiet and you think that you're being, short shrifted and stuff, it's like, how would we know? You haven't said a word all class. How would I know that you're like disgruntled and whatever until I get those horrible teacher, summary things that they put out, which are totally bogus, because it's like the one person who actually has an axe to grind is in there like grinding that axe when everyone else is like, yeah, it was a great class. I got what I wanted, but oh no, I have a bone to pick. And it's like, and they take that one seriously. And the other ones are like, yeah, well, everybody else was really quiet. It must suck, whatever. It's like, so talk to the teacher, tell them, open that line of communication because that's how you get information. It's not osmosis. You got to be in it to win it. You got to be working it. You got to be asking questions. There are no stupid questions, Well, the only stupid question is the one that's never asked. Beyond that, you got to ask questions. And that's how you get the gold. So, what can you expect to learn in my sequential storytelling class? Well, what you aren't going to get is how to draw superheroes or how to draw any character, or how to pencil comics or how to ink comics or any of that kind of stuff. Although I touch on aspects of that, what you're really going to get and what this course is really about is storytelling. It's about the nuts and bolts part of it, where it's not about doing finished art and, all that kind of stuff. I talk about where ideas come from, how to, kind of put yourself in the way of ideas, to like discover ideas. We talk about how to tell a story. So it's a lot about breakdown, layout, panel arrangement, panel shape, shape building, lighting, and about emotional content. I have tons of examples of professional work, my own as well as a lot of my heroes and other sequential art masters out there, European and American, whose work is just awesome. And what's really cool is like, look, it's, I'm pretty much a realist artist, right? I mean, I'm a figurative artist, but comics, sequential art can handle anything. You can do stick figures to tell stories. You can, so you can do anime, you can do cartooning, you can do, Bigfoot comics, you can do anything. So why we don't do finished art is, why should we bump heads about that stuff? That's a personal preference that you may have one way or the other in any of this myriad group of, myriad styles that are available. But everyone has to be able to tell a story and be able to work through the process of, doing layouts, translating those, refining those. And I talk about ways of thinking about, say, a panel and turning it into a 3D box, and like you can move that thing around, and how you think to look for the best point of view. We go through all this kind of stuff and then refining that process, right? You vomit this stuff on paper, get it out, make it real, and then turn on that analytical brain and say, okay, how can I make this better? Let me get the camera out, the metaphorical camera, and let me move it around and say, wow, that's a better angle. This is a better angle. This actually underscores, the angst that this character's feeling, blah, blah, blah. We get into those aspects of storytelling. So that's really the nuts and bolts. That's the hard work of sequential art in my mind. Yeah, learning to draw and drawing effectively and polishing your work to what you feel is professional work. That's a whole other set of hurdles and plateaus, but none of those mean anything if you can't tell a story for real, right? So it's like, before you go start singing arias, how about we learn how to talk, and then take off. So that's really the nuts and bolts of this particular course. So what can you expect to learn in my course on pastels? Well, I think I have a somewhat, I'm not going to say it's necessarily an alternative method of doing pastels, because I don't do, I honestly don't do pastels, I guess, in the traditional sense, although they're sticks of chalk. I mean, everybody's using sticks of chalk. So But my approach, what I'm hoping that you'll walk away with is sort of a newfound appreciation and love of pastel. I loved looking at them, but when I drew with them and then messed with them, it was like fingernails on a chalkboard for me. I was just like, yeah, yeah. And so it took years to find my way with it and to actually enjoy them and like really love what I get out of them. And that, I learned from at the foot of another master who, sort of showed me a different way. And then I have sort of played and worked it, toiled in that field, let's say, and developed my own take on that, without relying on that process that I was taught. And so, my processes generally, no matter what I'm doing, tend to be seat of the pants. I like diving in. I like not knowing what's going to happen. I like sort of taking a flyer and like, damn the torpedoes. I'm shooting for the moon. And if I fail, hey, okay, I'm going to keep shooting for the moon. I'm going to do another one. And if it fails, I'll do another one, without all the, the sort of kowtowing to a very specific process where I've got to get all my ducks in a row and I've got to make sure I've got the safety nets all set up and that they're tight. So if I fall, I can bounce back and dive in, whatever happens, happens. And from that, you develop a greater sense of confidence and you lose your temerity. You learn that there is no perfect line, that one line leads to another line, one shape leads to another shape, one value is another value, and you roll with the punches. You learn to incorporate the happy accidents, to turn most every accident into a happy accident, and that they end up becoming, rather than accidents, they are possibilities to a better piece. So we delve into shape building, shape welding, value, light, color a little bit, and working with like light patterns and shadow patterns. In a large way too, it's a course on how to learn how to see and to sort of forget the icons and all the baggage that we have because we know the names of all these things, to sort of set that aside and to look at the world fresh again and understand that there's another way of seeing that's really powerful, that makes picture making and drawing so much easier if you'll embrace it and run with it. So hopefully what you come out of this course with is, like I said, newfound abilities, newfound confidence in your own abilities, and the desire to explore and to fall flat on your face and pick yourself up again and make the most out of, make lemonade out of a whole bunch of lemons if you have to. You'll just, I think, be a stronger artist. Yeah, it's funny. There's a thing going around where people are like, and I'm assuming it's from people who don't do art, right? If you've ever watched anyone draw, and we all have, I'm talking to the choir here, it's magic. When I watch anyone else draw, it's magic. And I'm like, wow, why can't it be that easy for me, right? But, can art save the world, and all that? But I don't think it's necessarily about changing the world, but it's definitely about changing people's points of view. It's about sharing how I see or how you see, or, with as wide an audience as possible. I think art brings people closer together. It can also, it can also really piss people off. It can take people on, they can get really upset. And especially if you're, because there's propaganda and you can you can play people. I mean, art is powerful because it communicates on a visceral level, and it can communicate without language barriers, just with visuals or with sound. So yeah, it's incredibly powerful, and it does change people's minds. It can change people's attitudes, for better and worse. It's like it's a two-edged sword, just like everything else. But if only they use their power for good. So what is the value of an online art education? Well, I've been fortunate to work with several different variations of this, and so I know it works. It does work. There are a lot of people in higher education who believe that it's sort of bogus and it's this, get rich quick thing, which it ain't. But it does work. And that right now, it's a really interesting point in history that there is this like plethora of stuff out there that students have access to, anyone has access to. The problem with it is that it's not really curated in any way, shape, or form, and that's where you get New Masters Academy and some other ones that I've worked with. That they are putting everything under an umbrella. You're getting a complete course rather than, oh, here's this one weird, interesting tidbit. Not that this stuff isn't worth looking at and reaping the rewards, but what you're not getting is how it all actually works together. You're not getting a consistent vision, consistent, you're not getting continuity, and that's what New Masters Academy offers. It's complete, so you don't have to go out and search for all these other bits and pieces to try and like Frankenstein this education together. You're getting a complete thing here. So that's the best case scenario of all this, the places like this. So I think that it's incredibly powerful because, ultimately, if you want to teach, the slip of paper is important, because of the regulations and all this with higher education. But if you want to be an artist, if you want to like work in industries, it's all about the work. The bottom line is the work. Can you do it? And if you can't do it, that's the ultimate arbiter of the ultimate gatekeeper, is can you do it? And can you do it well? That's what's going to open the doors. The online education now is garnering a lot more respect and a lot more interest because it's about the work. It's about getting the work done and about focusing on doing, and without, I would say, the high cost of a lot of higher education, which you are getting a great education, but there's liberal arts and there's all this, which I think is important because it makes you a more well-rounded individual, but you can get that stuff, at other places too for a lot cheaper. So online education is now becoming really strong. It's like it's gathering speed, and COVID, has shown that it does work and it's incredibly effective, and it ain't going away. I mean, ultimately, everything that we're doing, that you study, that you artists that you meet, definitely pick their brains. It's all towards making you a better artist, which should encompass being open to any new possibilities, any new avenues. Why limit yourself? Don't limit yourself. Open yourself up. Try to, you should want to do everything. I push people to do printmaking if they can, because it's all about aesthetics. It's different than just drawing and painting. It's about choices, and it's all about making you not just a better artist, but a better human being. It's all about emotions. It's all about acceptance of other ideas, other bigger ideas, bigger worlds, other places, other art forms, and it just makes a better human, So, dive in, wallow in all this stuff, and keep yourself open to any possibilities, because that's where you go to new pastures, new adventures, and new discoveries.